Голя дуже довбиш, нехило довбиш, 15 децибел на протретьем, без включенных овощей, первый литр алкогольный включен, довбиш хорошо, да, только концерт посмотрел, Байконура, придумаем парилка не прет. Коля, 20 децибел это включение, К9 20 Коля. Напомни, что за антенна у тебя и эта аппаратура прет.
direct air capture and then storing underground. That again is very expensive, and we should only use it when really, really necessary.
Yeah, and some actually worry that relying too heavily on these carbon removal technologies could slow down the efforts to cut emissions at the source. I mean, how are policymakers going to strike that right balance?
I think the trick here is to keep them separate, to set a target for emission reductions and set a target for removals, and keep the two things separate and not mix them together. Sometimes in target setting they are mixed together also within the EU right now, but the way to ensure that one is not stopping the other from happening is by keeping them separate.
Mm-hmm. Well, also the law emphasizes on social fairness, energy security, and affordability. How can the EU ensure that households and vulnerable communities are not disproportionately affected by the transition?
I think that's a very, very important point, because the energy transition will only happen if the population is supporting it, and there it's very important to take the vulnerable communities, the parts of the population, to bring them along, and that's actually what the EU has thought about. So there will be an additional carbon price for fuels for heating and transport, and that will particularly be difficult for the populations that have less resources, and there the EU is thinking about how to deal with that matter and help those vulnerable communities to not be as much as affected, and basically put a major burden on those that can afford it.
Could ambitious climate laws like this risk fueling political backlash, especially in countries that depend heavily on carbon-intensive industries?
Well, there's two things. One is about jobs, and if you have this transition, then the governments really have to take care that the jobs that are lost in one industry are overcompensated by new jobs in new industries. That's possible if you have a long-term view, if you really think, okay, this is what needs to change, and plan accordingly. That's good. But the other element is that the energy prices and the cost of living are very important, in particular for the poorer population, and there it's very important to make smart policies to help the poorer population and not put a major burden on them, and that's something that I think the policymakers in all EU countries have now understood.
Okay, but we know that Europe is currently calling for energy independence or strategic autonomy. Does that mean an extra burden for consumers? Because, for instance, we know China is currently the global low-cost leader in these clean energy technologies like solar panels. But if Europe pursues greater strategic autonomy and limits China's imports, what would that mean for ordinary Europeans?
Well, first of all, the EU is part of the global market, and currently Europe is very dependent on fossil fuel imports. So this is a strain, and we see right now with the crisis in Iran, that gas prices have doubled, that oil and gas or petrol prices are rocket high. So it's really difficult for consumers right now, and pursuing renewable energy would be a way to get independent of these price volatilities. So it would be a clear advantage. Now the question is, where does it come from? So most of the solar modules are coming from China, indeed.